Boba Fett, you have not yet delivered Han Solo as promised. The great and powerful Jabba the Hutt grows impatient for his prize. You should know better than to disappoint the exalted and wise Jabba. It's gonna be a minute. Today, on the Comic Book Report, Star Wars, War of the Bounty Hunters. Stick around and check it out. Greetings and Happy New Year from a galaxy far, far away. If this is your first time, my name is Dominic and you are watching the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. As I mentioned at the top, we'll be looking at the Star Wars event series, War of the Bounty Hunters. But before we do, here are a couple quick facts about today's collection. Star Wars War of the Bounty Hunters was written by Charles Soule and penciled by Steve McNiven, Luke Ross, and David Messina. The comics in this collection were first published by Marvel Comics in 2021. This trade paperback collects Star Wars War of the Bounty Hunters Alpha and Star Wars War of the Bounty Hunter issues 1 through 5. This collection is 160 pages. Before we go any further, I'd like to issue a brief spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the book's contents, as well as commenting on plot points along the way. You've been warned. And without further ado, here is today's collection. Right away, you can see some beautiful cover art provided by Steve McNiven. Now, it is a standard size trade paperback with some glossy pages, and it runs about 6 issues with a few extras, so very standard size for a trade in my opinion. And it's well constructed. No real complaints from me here. I love the art they chose for the front and back cover, as well as some of their attention to detail with some of the weathering effects. It just is a very good looking book. And while we're still taking a look here, I should probably confess that I have not read many Star Wars comics. In fact, I would say I'm generally reluctant of any franchise that has comic book adaptations rather than things that began as comics themselves. I'm not really sure why I have this bias, and I know that there's been amazing comics that are from other franchises that have then been adapted into comic books, but for whatever reason, that's where I've been, so I really haven't pulled the trigger on a lot of these Star Wars books, even though I'm a big Star Wars fan. That is until this past Christmas, when my wife surprised me with this and a Darth Vader trade paperback collection as well. And I gotta say, after reading these, I've really enjoyed the ride. I found the writing in here to be really strong from Charles Soule, who I know from his Daredevil run. And as far as the art goes, I fell in love with what Steve McNiven did with that Alpha issue. It has almost a grainy or crosshatchy, sketchy kind of feel to it. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Frank Quietly, but a little bit messier and dirtier. But it's absolutely stunning, and it leaves me wanting to read more from that artist. The rest of the run comes from some of those other pencilers, which do a fine job, but it's a little too clean, and for me it kind of lost some of the personality from that opening Alpha issue. And because of that, on the whole, the art felt a little uneven, and kind of took me out of it for a minute, honestly. Now, as far as what this collection is about, I heard a buzz that we were getting this Star Wars event coming up. I've always enjoyed Boba Fett, I've always enjoyed Jango Fett, I love these Mandalorian bounty hunter guys. And of course, with the Book of Boba Fett show coming onto Disney+, I found myself losing some of my reluctance and jumping right onto the bandwagon for this one. So this story takes place right after Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, where Han Solo was frozen in carbonite, and now Boba Fett has to deliver this bounty to Jabba the Hutt. However, Boba realizes that the carbonite process that trapped Han Solo was kind of corrupted or done in a way that makes it incomplete, meaning that if he can't fix it, Han Solo will die and kind of evaporate into the carbonite. So the first issue, that Alpha one, has him going to a specialist who he believes can repair the carbonite job, but it requires money he doesn't have. The specialist basically says, hey, if you kill this person for me, I'll do the job for you. Of course, due to circumstances, Boba has to compete in a gladiator kind of tournament to kill this person. And after he triumphs in the arena, he comes to find that the carbonite specialist has been killed and Han Solo's frozen body has been stolen. And he's left with no clues as to who stole it. And shortly thereafter, he finds out that Jabba the Hutt has placed an open bounty on his head. This, of course, kicks off the titular War of the Bounty Hunters, as so many bounty hunters try to capture or kill Boba Fett, and Boba Fett tries to hunt down Han Solo. It's a lot of fun in these couple issues here. We see Han Solo changing hands, and we get great cameos from a lot of people in the Star Wars universe, some that really surprised me, frankly. A big plot point that happens in this series as well is that Han Solo gets put up for like a black market auction with the guest list for this event full to the brim with a handful of gangs and other shady organizations within the Star Wars universe. The biggest surprise in this collection for me was who is hosting this auction, which is Qi'ra, who represents the emergence of the Crimson Dawn, which was one of these premier shadowy organizations that was thought to have been done and gone. This was such a great surprise to me because, unpopular opinion, I really loved the Solo movie that came out a few years ago, which introduced this character of Qi'ra and kind of dabbled with mentions of the Crimson Dawn. And frankly, I've been a bit bummed that we're not really getting a sequel to that yet, if ever. And I thought that the character of Qi'ra was pretty well crafted, and I wanted to see what happened with her story after watching that film. So to see that character show up here in the midst of this big Star Wars event was such a welcome surprise for me. I love seeing her role expanded and seeing what it means that Crimson Dawn is back at this time in Star Wars history. And while this event series served just fine as a story with a beginning, middle, and end that was satisfying in my opinion, it also paved the way for a sequel event series that I believe is ongoing now, called Crimson Reign, I believe, which is presumably following the exploits of the upcoming Crimson Dawn organization. And while I am curious, this was just such a fun Boba Fett story. And I know that there has been a ton of tie-in issues from all of the other Star Wars comics into this event, and I will say I haven't read any of those. I've just read this trade paperback, and I found it to be serviceable and like I wasn't missing too much. However, I don't think that a read like this is accessible to someone who isn't at least moderately invested in the Star Wars universe. And with that, I think it's time I go ahead and give Star Wars War of the Bounty Hunters a grade. For this entertaining thrill ride, featuring one of the most renowned bounty hunters in fiction, The Comic Book Report is giving Star Wars War of the Bounty Hunters a B-. In my opinion, this book is definitely a cut above average. It has such fun character cameos, and frankly, it kept me riveted as I turned each subsequent page. I was surprised at how much I enjoyed reading a Star Wars comic book. And it even leaves me somewhat eager to check out the sequel event series coming out. However, I have to recognize that in this collection, I felt like the art was a bit uneven. And I think you have to be a fan of the movies to really enjoy or even understand a book like this. But with that being said, as someone who enjoys the movies, I don't feel like I needed to read or know anything else to enjoy this standalone event series. And if you've read it already, or you've read some of those tie-in issues, I'd love to hear about it below in the comments. And that's going to do it for today. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Comic Book Report. And if you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. Have a good one.